I think that the real privilege of being strong is the power that it gives you to help people who are not strong. I think the real privilege of being fit and bright and young, strong, is the ability that that gives you to give others a helping hand when they're not strong, when they're old or disabled or poor or in need. And it isn't a sentimental attitude. I think it's a way of proving just what your strength amounts to.
When he became a member of Parliament, his grandfather, Mary's father, said, "That's all very well, my boy, but don't forget that MP means a man of principle."
My father was very funny about it. When I called him and told him I'd been selected for the seat that I have in South Wales, the place where I was living, in the valley in which I grew up, I said, "Westminster next stop, Dad." And he said, "Oh, you don't know." He said, "People are funny."
His father had the physical strength, his mother had the moral strength. In fact, she was quite a religious person.
Oh, yeah.
Being deeply religious, what they call chapel in South Wales. She absolutely radiated this feeling of warmth and care and respect for others.
My mother had a great deal of influence, both because she was a strong and intelligent and very loving woman, but also, of course, because she was a very committed professional. And apart from all the other lessons that she taught me, the one thing that came across very directly is that compassion by itself is a wonderful thing, but it's never enough. Compassion needs to be put into action.
I think of the youngsters I meet. 3, 4, 5 years out of school, never had a job, and they say to me, "Do you think we'll ever get a job?" These are young men and women living in a free country, but they don't feel free. I think of the 55-year-old woman I meet, waiting months to go into hospital for an operation, her whole existence clouded by pain. She is a citizen of a free country, but she doesn't feel free.
Both of my parents died at the back end of November and December 1971, within a few days of each other. That was a shattering experience. But I had this immense good fortune of having Glenys and Stephen, who was then nearly 2 years old, and Rachel was born a week after my mother died. And as human beings do, you have to pick it up and get on with it. And I know that my parents' instinct would have been to say, give yourself to the next generation. Think the best things of us and remember us, but get on with life, because life goes on. I'm married to a woman of high intelligence and great independence and immense warmth. And I wouldn't want to be married to anybody who didn't have those qualities. Because I'm fortunate in being married to a woman of independence and of her own views, then people can't understand that that can work in harness, in partnership, in friendship, in deep affection. They assume that one partner is going to dominate the other all the time, which I think is just very immature. I just don't think it makes sense.
My husband and I, who were always very fond of him when he was this lively young backbencher, used to say, well, there's a future leader of the Labour Party. But quite frankly, we thought perhaps he was a bit young to step into it immediately. And of course that was a tremendous liability for him to overcome. People saying he's too young, he hasn't got the experience and so on. He should serve his time in some kind of ministerial office. And he's risen above that. And he's risen above it by his absolute determination not to waver on the policies and not to allow anybody to slap him down, to downgrade him in any way. There's real steel at the heart of that young man.
I'll tell you what happens with impossible promises. You start with far-fetched resolutions. They are then pickled into a rigid dogma, a code. And you go through the years sticking to that, outdated, misplaced, irrelevant to the real needs, and you end in the grotesque chaos of a Labour council hiring taxis to scuttle around the city, handing out redundancy notices to its own workers. I tell you, and you listen, I'm telling you, you can't play politics with people's jobs and with people's services.
When he tackled the question of militant head-on was one of the most superb political performances I've ever seen. It was a very gripping occasion, and it took real guts to put the issue firmly and squarely before the party as he did then.
I think he's very like Gorbachev in the Soviet Union. He's got a nice smile, but he's got steel teeth.
They say that he's young and inexperienced. Well, that was said of William Pitt, you know, when he became Prime Minister in the 18th century at the age of 25. And his reply was, yes, I know, I am young and inexperienced, but it is a fault I am remedying every day.
I think that because of the way in which people of all ages and every social class feel they can approach me, have a chat to me, whether they agree with me or disagree with me, they know they're going to get a straight answer. And that makes it easy for me to be in touch, keep in touch.
Why am I the first Kinnock in 1,000 generations to be able to get to university? Why is Glenys the first woman in her family in 1,000 generations to be able to get to university? Was it because all our predecessors were thick? Did they lack talent? Those people who could sing and play and recite and write poetry? Those people who could make wonderful, beautiful things with their hands? Those people who could dream dreams, see visions? But why didn't they get it? Was it because they were weak? Those people who could work 8 hours underground and then come up and play football? Weak? Those women who could survive 11 childbearings? Were they weak? Does anybody really think that they didn't get what we had because they didn't have the talent, or the strength, or the endurance, or the commitment? Of course not. It was because there was no platform upon which they could stand.
Confidence, that's the objective. People strong and free because they know that they live in a good environment where, should they fall upon difficult times, they're not going to fall upon tragic times. If they should encounter difficulty, they know that it's not going to lock them out of opportunity for the rest of their lives. That's what we're after.
I spent most of my youth in South London until well into my 30s at different houses. But it's a very vivid area. It's never dull, it's always changing. It has a tremendous vibrancy that very few parts of the country would understand. And yet there is an innate friendliness in the area that those people who live there understand very well. Can we turn left into Atlantic Road in a moment, please? I think I'd like to go down there and have a look. This is really the heart of Brixton. Once you come down the main road, turn left into the market. It's where Brixton takes its heart from. And everybody who lives in and around the area is familiar with Brixton Market and goes there and shops there. Can I have a pound of those tomatoes? Nice to see you.
Nice seeing you.
We used to come in and buy kippers.
Well, we still sell the kippers.
I'll have some kippers. I'll have some kippers. When I was in my early teens, I used to occasionally erect a soapbox. I had two soapboxes. One that I used to erect in Brixton Market and the other in Brixton Road. And I used to talk about political matters of the day, and everyone was very tolerant. Some people used to listen, some used to engage in badinage. Lots of other people smiled cheerfully and moved on. But it was a very good experience.
Very nice to see you.
How do you do?
You used to come to my shop, another shop recorded. The record shop used to come
I
to.
remember. Yes. This is Cold Harbour Lane. All these old houses with the basements down there. And the Enterprise pub, which has been there for as long as I can recall. And here's Eastlake Road, and that's the house we lived in for many years. Behind there in Eastlake Road, we had a wicket pitched on the wall of the houses opposite and used to play cricket up against it for hours on end. I think it's a fallacy for people to think that because of my background and where I came from that I should be a socialist. Why should I be a socialist? It is people in that background who have actually suffered most from the fact that we've had a society in which the free enterprise system moved ahead and then was blocked as one moved over the years from conservative governments to socialist governments. When I was in my mid-teens, we moved to Burton Road. Where you see the house ahead with the two white arches, immediately opposite there, that is where we lived. Now, is it still there? It is. It is. It's still there. It's still there. It's hardly changed. We lived in the downstairs flat. There was an area below ground and ground floor. And I think there was a room or so on the first floor, but not the second. The second was occupied by other people. And it was a huge improvement on Cold Harbour Lane. It was a great step up. I was unemployed, and I remember vividly what it was like to spend your mornings looking for a job, often vainly, and your afternoons wondering what would happen the next day. There is only one cure for unemployment. There's only one way to put people back in permanent, secure, sustainable jobs that they can be confident in. And that is to have the right economic framework to produce steady, sustainable, continuing growth in the economy. That takes time. It can be unpopular while you do it. It is difficult while you do it. It can't be done with short-term stimulations of the economy. It can only be done by bringing inflation down and keeping it down so that people know it won't move. The first ingredient has to be a competitive tax structure. Low taxes give people the opportunity to invest, to provide for their own family, and create a cycle of growth. You cannot lift yourself out of recession with high taxes. That perpetuates recession. Over there is St. Matthew's Church. That's where Norma and I were married in 1970. And beyond it is Lambeth Town Hall, where I was a councillor from 1968 onwards, and practically lived for 3 years. I wouldn't have missed the few years I was a Lambeth councillor for anything. It was one of the best learning schools in politics, and I think in life as well, that one could possibly have. You had almost every sort of problem to examine. People with all sorts of ambitions, some of which could be realized, some of which couldn't. You had a population mix of a most extraordinary kind, a large number of people in very great difficulty often.
Where do you all live, locally?
People are entitled to their own views, to their own instincts, to their own beliefs. And it is quite wrong to try and pigeonhole everybody into the same beliefs that the majority of people hold. Firstly, it cannot be done because individuality is there and it cannot be changed, and you should not try and change it. But secondly, if you tried to do it, you'd have a very intolerant, very unpleasant, very autocratic society, and not the sort of society I would wish to see. People are individuals, they have their own instincts, they have their own feelings. as a matter of privacy. That is a matter, I think, predominantly for them. I think every family has their own experiences of the NHS and will draw upon it. That's certainly true in my case. In their later years, both my parents were ill. They needed protracted medical treatment, both in hospital from time to time and also direct through their general practitioners. And they got it. Excellent treatment. Treatment that we couldn't possibly have provided for ourselves. And I saw then, at a young age and at very close quarters, the peace of mind that the availability of that treatment actually provided to my parents and to the rest of my family. I want to make sure that's there for everyone else. The Patient's Charter attempts to make sure that the excellent medical service is also provided as a personal service with the greatest possible dignity. I'm pretty clear in my mind what every parent wants for their own children. They want them as a basic to learn to read, to learn to write, to learn to add up, and to do that easily and readily as a matter of course. That is what we are determined to ensure is provided in the schools. And above all, that people have the sort of education that will prepare them for the changing world in which they're going to work for the rest of their lives. Nothing will be the same again. This world is becoming more competitive and changing at a more rapid rate than any before. In future, people won't leave school with one career in mind, one qualification, and stay at that through the rest of their life. They'll need to be trained, they'll need to be retrained, and then perhaps retrained again. It will be a consistent learning process through life. And without those basics, people simply won't be equipped to undertake that changing learning process. First time I came to the House of Commons as a Member of Parliament was in 1979. And I remember very clearly the excitement there was at that stage. Every time I go in it, I still get a thrill. I'm not remotely blasé about being part of the House of Commons. The atmosphere that it generates, the authority that it has, the extent to which people turn to the House of Commons when there are really serious problems, and that atmosphere pervades the whole place. There are many advantages in politics. It's very exciting, it's very worthwhile. You may, if you're lucky, have the opportunity to do something that really matters. I think my background is an asset, not a disadvantage. That's how I've always found it. I think the principal point about making policy is that it is made up of two components. Firstly, intellectual conviction. You have to believe in what you're doing. But secondly, I think it is personal experience. If you've done something, seen it, or been it, or felt it, then you can understand what it means, and you can understand how it affects other people in their own individual lives.
Pure water. First add pesticides, then add chemical fertilizer, a bit of ammonium, some industrial solvents and some lead, and finally some aluminium. Now it's been turned into a glass of tap water. Unfortunately, I have to drink it.
The food we eat today may look nice, but it's not really good for you. Imagine me as a lettuce. To make me bigger, farmers add nitrate fertilizers. To make me more attractive, farmers add pesticides. And to increase my chances of survival, herbicides are sprinkled onto me to kill all the weeds. And finally, to make my looks last longer, I might get a good dose of radiation. A very fine lettuce, wouldn't you agree?
For years now, sewage has been dumped into the seas, and now poisonous waste, which is too dangerous on land, is burnt at seas. Particles from the waste end up in the water, affecting the tiny organisms which are the base of the food chain. In the end, this affects seals, dolphins, fish, and of course us.
1992 is only a few years away, so it's important that you should meet some of the invisible men who will be governing your life and mine. This man will be helping multinational companies to use up more of the world's resources. This man will be responsible for security throughout the EEC, and that man will be providing business incentives for companies to relocate to cheaper areas than Britain. If you don't recognise them, it's because you've never seen them before, and you certainly won't have voted for them, because you can't.
You may have wondered why all the adverts you've seen about 1992 have all featured businessmen and women. This is because they're the only people who will benefit from it. It's not about improving the quality of life, it's about improving profits. So there'll be more factories using more materials, making more waste. There'll be more people driving more cars, making more pollution, destroying more countryside. The greenhouse effect is already happening around us. 1992 will only make its devastating effects happen more quickly. The philosophy of more and more will lead to less in the end for everybody.
The opportunity to decide which party has the most effective programs and policies. The Natural Law Party is the only party with scientific and reliable solutions for every area of life. Natural law is the intelligence that guides the evolution of the whole universe. Natural law governs the galaxies, the solar system, all life on Earth, and certainly our own lives are governed by natural law. The practical programs of the Natural Law Party use the intelligence of nature to unfold the full potential of life of every person and the life of the nation. The most fundamental need today in the field of government is to create integration in collective consciousness and dissolve the high levels of stress in society. Without this, problems will continue to multiply. No solutions will work. The Natural Law Party will make this area its first priority. We have a systematic and scientifically tested program to create integration and coherence in the nation. The Natural Law Party will establish a group of 7,000 experts in transcendental meditation and yogic flying. When a person practices transcendental meditation and yogic flying, a high degree of integration is produced in brain activity. The person experiences bubbling bliss and stress is dissolved. This is the basis of many practical results in every area of life. Through a group of 7,000 experts in yogic flying, this effect of coherence radiates to the whole nation, bringing down stress and negativity in society and making the nation strong, dynamic, and integrated. Over 500 scientific studies have been conducted on the benefits of the programs of the Natural Law Party. Of these, over 40 have shown the benefits of creating coherence through a group of yogic flyers. For example, in this country, a group of yogic flyers has reduced the crime rate in Merseyside by 60% during the last 7 years compared to all the other metropolitan areas in the United Kingdom. Through this program of creating coherence in national consciousness, the Natural Law Party is the only party that can strengthen the sovereignty of the United Kingdom and at the same time create a real union of the European nations.
Right, the Liberal Party, not the Liberal Democrats. No, we're the Liberal Party, and we'd like to give you an insight into some of our policies. But first a warning, we're not a party of the centre of British politics, the dead centre as we will call it. Instead, we're a party of radical ideas. We have a long heritage of ideas. The NHS was one of our ideas 50 years ago. 2 years ago, at the European elections, we put forward our radical ideas on a Commonwealth of Europe rather than the Maastricht Treaty, and this gained us 100,000 votes. And we also have scores of local councillors. But tonight, time is short, so we'll look at our 3 key areas, our 3 Ps of policy: peace, people, and the planet.
There's been a lot of controversy recently about landmines, and we favour a worldwide ban on them, whether made in China, Russia, or here in Britain. Indeed, Liberals would go further still and end the international arms trade. Surely we can transfer the skill and technology to peaceful, beneficial use. While scrapping Britain's nuclear weapons, we'd still maintain strong, well-equipped forces to defend our interests. We're in favour of mediation and non-military solutions to conflict, based on a revitalised United Nations and see worldwide democracy as our goal. And just think of the money we'll save. How about investing it in health and education? So, in summary, Liberals would end the arms trade, scrap nuclear weapons, promote mediation, and use the savings on health and education.
But what do Liberal policies mean for people? Let's look at our second P. Well, let's quickly talk about what we don't want. We certainly don't want identity cards and believe that their introduction would be a dangerous infringement of personal liberty. What we most certainly do want for the people of this country is a Bill of Rights. It's a basic premise of the Liberals that we put freedom first, and as such we feel a Bill of Rights is long overdue in a so-called free country. Now, freedom's fine, but not if you're penniless. So, without any interference from Brussels, Liberals propose a minimum wage of £4.26 per hour to restore some dignity to the lowest paid. And what about the other things that people care about? The health service, for starters. It's clear that the artificial internal market isn't working, no more than the bureaucratic old authorities. What's needed is a radical new approach. Liberals propose that hospitals be controlled by democratically elected representatives of the communities they serve. So, the Liberal Party would oppose identity cards, favour a Bill of Rights, let local people control their health service.
Liberals recognise the need for an efficient transport system, including the reopening of 700 miles of railway to serve an extra 3 million of our population. What's more, Liberals propose free, yes, free local public transport. Now that's radical for you. So we're all for long-term thinking on our stewardship of the planet. Just to recap then, Liberals oppose atomic power and favour alternatives, favour free public transport and a European pollution police force.
Peace, people and the planet, the 3 Ps of Liberal policy. But how does the Liberal Party compare with the other parties, especially the other 3? Well, we'd scrap nuclear weapons and spend the money on schools and hospitals. The others wouldn't. We'd allow local people to control their own health service. The others wouldn't. We'd oppose identity cards as a threat to liberty. The others wouldn't. And what about Europe? A big issue. We favour a Commonwealth. The others broadly agree with Maastricht. I hope we've said enough to prove that we're a party of radical ideas, not the dead centre, but we've a whole range of other ideas, from animal rights to homelessness, and from crime to the very way in which we're governed.